Add SSO to your JHipster apps with OIDC. That's what we're talking about today. So the cool thing about SSO, single sign-on, and OIDC, OpenID Connect, is they're very useful when you're generating very many JHipster apps. So before I started working for Okta, I actually really didn't have a whole lot of interest in single sign-on. But if you're an enterprise and you're actually developing more than one app, chances are you want your users to be outside of your app. And this is what OIDC provides you, is having users outside of your app, and you can share those users between all your JHipster apps. So my name is Matt Raible. I'm a hick from the sticks. I grew up in the backwoods of Montana with no electricity and no running water, and I did have to walk 2 miles to the bus stop every day. And it felt like it was uphill both ways. In the winter, we could actually ski, so that was pretty fun. This is my lovely family. I live in Denver. Jack's a little older now. He's almost taller than me. And I have a middle child, Volkswagen bus. It took 10 years to build, and now it's fun to drive. And I work for Okta. So if you're ever sitting there thinking, I want to build authentication, you're wrong. Friends don't let friends build authentication. So use us instead. We'll give you a free account up to 1,000 users per month, and works pretty nice. And you can actually email me directly, and I will help solve your problems. No support. So OAuth is an open standard for authorization. It actually stands for Open Authentication. Anyone can implement it. It basically does secure delegated access to client applications, and it works over HTTPS and authorizes devices, APIs, servers. It was really a response to SAML. SAML was great for the web, but it really didn't work for devices and IoT and TVs and things like that. And OAuth can work with those. And it uses access tokens. And so it basically allows you to do server-server communication with client credentials, allows you to do browser-based apps, so single-page apps. You can use what's called an implicit flow. You can also do mobile and native apps with what they call PKCE, which is PKCE for doing basically more secure exchange. And then even console or TVs or command lines. There's a way of making all those work with OAuth. And you can think of it like hotel key cards, but for apps. When you get a hotel key card, you go and authorize at the front desk. You show them some identification. You say, hey, here's my ID or here's my passport. They give you an access token in the form of a hotel key card, and then you can access all the resources in that hotel. So OAuth Simplified is basically an app request authorization from the user. The user authorizes an app and delivers proof. And so that is probably the most confusing part of OAuth is number 2. When the user authorizes the app, if they're already logged in to, say, Facebook, all they do is they click login with Facebook. Facebook prompts them with something that says, do you authorize? And then you go into it. If you're using something like Okta or using something like Keycloak, chances are you're not already logged in. And so you get a login screen. If you weren't logged into Facebook, same thing would happen. You would get a login screen. You'd have to log into Facebook and then continue from there. So once you've logged in, then you get access tokens. But there is nothing in the spec about what happens when you get that login screen. So Keycloak, Okta, Facebook, everyone, once you hit that login screen, what happens from there until you get the access token is not in the spec. There's nothing in OAuth about authentication. It's not part of the OAuth spec. And that's where OpenID Connect pretty much comes in, because OpenID Connect will give you user information. There's nothing in OAuth that gives you user information. All it gives you is said, hey, this user said they could access it, or they authorized access, and I gave them an access token. And with OIDC, it's layered on top of OpenID, or on top of OAuth, but it also gives you an ID token that has the user's information in it. And unlike OAuth, OAuth only says that the token has to be a string. It can be a random string of characters. So if you look at JHipster's UAA server, or you look at just any OAuth server, it can just be like a GUID that comes by as access token. What OIDC adds is the ID token has to be in JOT formation. So JWT in their spec, they actually have the abbreviation as JOT, J-O-T. And so this is what a JSON web token looks like. It's got a header, it's got a body, it's got a signature, and it's got claims in that body. You really don't need to know this stuff, but it's kind of important just to show you how things are being transferred across the wire. So with OpenID Connect, it's really the same thing as OAuth. There's a well-known OpenID configuration there on the far right. And how that works is it allows you to do discovery. So once you know that endpoint, that every OAuth server or every OIDC server has that endpoint. And once you talk to that, it gives all the endpoints you need to do token authorization, to do token validation, and even to get the user info. That's another endpoint that you can hit. And then with authorization code flow, this is what we have in JHipster. So the two main ones that I deal with a lot of times are implicit and authorization code flow. And authorization code flow is basically the gold standard in OAuth of doing, OAuth authorization. So the user starts by hitting JHipster. They click the login button. That goes to localhost 8080/login, which is served up by Spring Security. So Spring Security knows that there's a few OAuth properties, and then it redirects based on those properties to either Keycloak, Okta, or if you have it configured with Google, that should work as well. And then it sends an authentication request with scopes, and one of those standard scopes is OpenID. And then the user authenticates and consents to the client to say, hey, you can access my identity. And then the authorization code grant comes back. So it's actually a code in the URL and optionally an ID token. And it's returned to the client, and then there's another redirect. The client authenticates and exchanges that code for the ID and access tokens. And they can also get a refresh token if they want. So the client optionally fetches additional claims with the access token from the user info endpoint. So now what I'll do is a demo where I'll create a JHipster app. I'll show you how it works with Keycloak. I'll show you some code I wrote to basically take the data from the ID provider and save it in the local database. What that allows you to do is actually have relationships with the user. I'll show you how Okta works, and then we'll deploy it to Heroku, and then I'll show you some customization things. If I can exit out. It's like Vim. How do I quit? Okay, so are we still mirrored? Looks like it. I know it's hard to see in the back, so I apologize, especially since everything's way down here. So I'll do this. You can see I created this app right before we started here, just because it's a little easier to do that than on stage. So it did take a few minutes and a few seconds, 3 minutes, 3 seconds to run. And if we look at not the RC Global. Oh, did I create it in the home directory? I made the worst mistake. No, I don't think so. So cat eorc. You can see here this is created with JHipster 5. It's a monolith. Has a base name of gallery. It's got authentication type of OAuth 2. It's got cache and Postgres and protractor. So if we were to start basically cd into this and we go docker compose, you do have to start Keycloak or nothing's going to work, right? You won't be able to log in. So you do docker compose and source main docker Keycloak up. So wait for that to start up, and then we'll run this guy here. I'm hoping to show you one of the biggest failures that I see with JHipster a lot, but it might not happen. That is that when you launch it on 8080, you get a blank screen, and you're like, what? This thing's supposed to be awesome. That's because Webpack didn't compile everything beforehand, and you do yarn start, and then it compiles it, and then you restart Maven, then everything works. But we'll see if that happens or not. So we'll go to localhost 8080. It didn't happen. It already compiled it. So when you click sign in here, you'll notice at the bottom it goes to 8080 login. That goes to Keycloak, which we just updated to version 4. You can do admin, and it logs you in, and you're good to go. Well, the cool thing is in Keycloak, this is a big complaint. So if you go here and you go log out, and then you go log in again, it doesn't prompt you to log in. Why? It's single sign-on. When you log in with Facebook and you log out of that app, you don't want to log out of Facebook, or you'd be like, this kind of stinks, right? And so people have asked about it so much that I did write a blog post this week on how to do it with Okta. I didn't research Keycloak, but I'm sure it's possible there as well. So you can have what they call a global logout. So you have the behavior where when you do log out, it logs you out of your IDP or your identity provider as well. But I did want to show you in Keycloak, you can go to 9080 and log into the admin console, And of course, it's nice and easy, admin, admin. And you can go to login here, and you can turn on user registration. So when you do that, you can go back to your app, and you know, you might have to use an incognito window here. That's what I usually do to simulate logging out. You go here, and you'll notice now there's a register button, right? So you can go and say first name is Matt Raible, my email is that, and do mraible, do a password that hopefully works. And now I'm logged in right there, right? I just registered as a new user. Well, one of the problems is, well, let's generate some entities so we can see what that problem is. I'm going to go to start.jhipster.tech, sign in here, and I have some entities that I have for this photo gallery. So this photo gallery has albums, it has photos, it has tags. So similar to the blog example I've done in the past, we can download that. Looks like I might have already done it, but now we can do JHipster import. Let's do it so you can see it. JHipster import JDL and downloads. We'll just do that one. So this will create all those entities. And isn't it funny how TypeScript takes longer than Java to compile? I mean, we used to wait for Java to compile all the time. Now we're waiting for TypeScript all the time, which I'm fine with because, hey, that means more time to goof off, more time to hang out at the water cooler. You know, like you get to sword fight in the hallway. The reason I want to show you this is what happens with Keycloak, and I haven't done a whole lot of research into it, but it doesn't put the user into any group. So they can log into JHipster. We don't prevent that. But we also expect you to have certain roles whenever you're navigating around the site. You're either an administrator or you're a user, and Keycloak doesn't actually add you to any groups. So what happens here is we probably still logged in over here as mraible, do a refresh. I have to log in again. Okay, there we go. Oh, now we got no entities. Now you see the problem I'm talking about. You're like, man, I just created those. Where are they? Oh, there they are. But sometimes you have to do yarn start, right, and then everything works. So you're not authorized to access this page. That's because this is an actual, you know, role user page, and we don't have role user as, you know, those default ones. Now, if we logged in, you know, as a different user, we have to use another incognito window, but I'll skip over that. I do want to turn this into a PWA. Who likes PWAs? Progressive Web Apps? So I think there's a few people that might be using JHipster for progressive web apps. It's super easy to do, though. All you have to do is modify index.html and uncomment this file for this script right here. That's it. But you have to run it in prod mode. So it doesn't actually do it in development, which is nice because what service workers do and what PWAs do is they cache everything in your browser. So they cache like network requests, which allows you to work offline. And you can install the app, and it's pretty cool. But as web developers, we've been spending most of our lives trying to get our browser to stop caching stuff, right? And now you turn on PWAs, and it caches everything. Man, I get so many headaches from it, right, when you're developing with it. So you really don't want it in dev mode. You just want it like in production mode. And you tweak that and make sure it works. So I think that's good that we've done things that way. So I turn that on. I have those working. Let's go back, make sure I'm on track with my presentation here. The things I said I was going to talk about. Dropbox, presentations. Oh, geez. It's almost at the end. Okay, save user snapshot. So we need to look at that code. So idea. And IntelliJ is great for demos, not quite as good as VS Code because you know why? Indexing. It sits there and it indexes all of Node modules. And you know how many files there is in Node modules? Over 1 million, maybe 2 million. And so you gotta like wait for it to do stuff. But I should be able to navigate to the files that I want to show you and look at. Basically, it's account resource is one of the major ones, and then that goes into a user service, which actually does like the logic to save the user. So we'll see if we can navigate. Okay, account resource. And we do it basically right after you log in. So as soon as you log in, what happens is there's a call to API account. And that API account is right here. You'll see we check if the principal is an instance of OAuth 2 authentication. If it is, then we go ahead and say get user from authentication. You'll notice there's an else statement there that also does the old behavior, which basically allows you in your unit test to just mock out Spring completely and its authentication object and not care about an OAuth provider. So we can't quite go to that. Oh, there we go. So what happens in the get user authentication, we just grab everything out of there so we can get all the user's information, their email, all that. We can extract the authorities. So as long as you've configured either Keycloak or Okta to have a claim called group or roles, then we will take that and map it to Spring's authorities. And then down here, we basically get the token and we return this sync user with IDP. And what this does is there's a lot of code here to basically save it in the database. And the reason we did that is so you can have relationships to user. Because when you're using JHipster, like the user is usually a central object and you want to have relationships. So if you have a photo album that belongs to a user, and if you don't have any user in the database, you can't create relationships with them, and it just complicates things from a JPA perspective, right? And so I just did this because it was easy and it made sense, and it works pretty well. So back to here. Now we go to Okta. So it's pretty cool with Okta. Basically, I'll show you how to register. You go to developer.okta.com. Not quite as cool as start.spring.io or start.jhipster.tech, but close. I mean, it's pretty. Never build auth again, please. You can sign up here, and then once you do that, you basically have an account, and so you can click this big login button here. I have a few accounts, so I'll just log into one of them. And you'll see you have dev 158606 is like the name of my tenant. I don't know what any of my passwords are. I just keep them in one password. Works great until one password doesn't work, and then you're like, can't really work today. It's like GitHub being down, right? You're like, snow day. So this is our developer console here, and what you'll do to begin is you'll go to applications and you'll create an application. And since we're doing the authorization code flow, you can just click web and next, and then you name it whatever you want. And the most important thing is right here. You'll want localhost 8080 login. That's what Spring comes from, so that's the redirect URI you're coming from. And then if you did want to do like logout, you would save this and then go to the next step, and you can configure logout URIs as well. So if we went in here and we edited it, then you could configure a logout URI right here, which you won't need with the default JHipster setup. But if you want to implement the logout thing I'll show you, then you'll need that. And besides that, you'll need these client IDs, these client secrets, and this URL up here, this 158606, where you can actually find it here as well. We call it an org URL. And so where that comes in handy is I have it saved in Dropbox. Probably not the best place, but hey, those are my Okta settings. And I can export those as environment variables. So what this allows me to do is I can say source, Dropbox, Okta settings, and then restart my app. And that's it. And now you'll be using Okta. And the beauty is Spring security, Spring Boot, and properties, how they override things. So it makes it very easy to say, hey, I'm going to leave my Keycloak settings in my application.yaml file, and I'm going to check that into GitHub because that's generic, and client secret is called web app, big deal. But when you're doing something like Okta, maybe that's your production settings. You don't want to check those into GitHub, right? You don't want to have any secrets in GitHub. And so then once you do this, you can go to localhost 8080 and you click sign in. And instead of going to Keycloak, you go to Okta. Oh boy, already in there. Well, this is where you're like, okay, clean that. Then do that, and then the incognito window. I mean, if I didn't have a failure in the demo, you wouldn't think it's real, right? Like, my company does these conferences where everyone rehearses the demos so much and everything's so perfect that I wonder if people are like, that wasn't real. And you see a lot of companies do that. So I like to be the guy that fails every once in a while just to show you it's real. So we'll do incognito just in case we're still logged in somewhere. See, this is the worst one. You're like, what the heck? Yeah, yarn start will get you where you want to go. And that's on 9,000. So we do have things in place that even if you logged in from yarn start with 9,000, we'll redirect you back to 9,000 because otherwise it's going to hit 8080. It's going to think it needs to go back to 8080. And we have some code in there that actually handles that. So that's going to pop up. Now we can click sign in. Now we're at Okta. I have a user here that I can log in with. And this one has user. You can see we're logged in there. But the other cool thing is, you know, Okta now has self-service registration as well. So this is something that we haven't advertised a whole lot, mostly because it's actually one of those things that you have to like email support, right? And you don't want to write a blog post that says, hey, turn on self-registration by emailing support, because who knows how long that takes, right? So I have it enabled on my account. You can email me, I can get it enabled on yours, but it is, it's not like you just flip a switch and you're good to go. I mean, it is, but someone has to do it for you, so we're working on that to make it better. But you go to admin here, and then this is what we call a developer console. This isn't what IT administrators are used to. They're used to our classic UI, and under directory, there's self-service registration, and you can turn it on. And I've already configured something, so I just disabled it. So now it'll show a sign up link at the bottom, and I can assign it to a default group. So this is one of those things that I couldn't figure out how to do with Keycloak, and then you can specify all the different fields, and you can redirect them back to a custom URL. So when you do that, then we'll do a new incognito window. Then we go to localhost 8080. Oh, 9,000, sorry. Sign in. And now we can sign up right here, so let's try that. Oh, this is one thing that won't work. So Gmail has this great feature, right, where you're like, hey, jhipster@gmail.com. That's not allowed as a JHipster username. So this will fail validation when it tries to save it in the database because of the plus sign. So don't do that. Or maybe we should fix it, because it's a handy feature. Did you know that in Gmail you can do that, plus, and then you'll get emails to there and you can track where it came from, right? It's kind of handy. So, oh, now you got to figure out the passwords. I hate this. So where's my one password? Oh, we can just try it. 8 characters, 1 uppercase. There we go. Matt. Oh, then I got a verification email. Now you get to see all my email. Should have turned that off. That is a feature you can turn off. It's really just like Java Champion stuff. This email I sent to Joe this morning about Heroku. I got it working. So you click activate account, and then you get to see, come on, baby. Oh, so I did configure a custom domain. Check that out. id.jhipster.org, but I didn't do it very well because it doesn't work. 808 octapreview.com. 404. Well, that worked yesterday. I won't continue there, but you can register. It logs you in, and you can access everything. The other thing I wanted to show you is just that that PWAs work pretty well, but they work even better when you do them with HTTPS. So in our documentation, we've added some new stuff on HTTPS. So if you go to jhipster.tech/security, at the bottom here, there's a slick feature where you can basically, in the configuration for Spring Security, you can say, hey, if the exported proto header is present, which both Cloud Foundry and Heroku use, default to or force HTTPS. So in our security configuration, we can go in here, because you don't want to force it locally, right? Because if you have a certificate, it's probably invalid, and then you got to click through everything. If you go to security configuration, and you go down to here, you can do .and, then paste that in. Oh, the copy and paste. This is my least favorite friend on Linux so far. It sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. There you go. So that's all you need to do there. And of course, take out the semicolon. And now we can deploy it to Heroku. So we can say, hey, JHipster Heroku. JHipster Heroku. We'll deploy it as gallery PWA. We'll try the EU. Why not? Compile locally or compile on Heroku. The reason I do compile on Heroku, it's faster to compile in the cloud than on my Linux box and upload a 50 meg jar. That's why. So I already have access to it, so this should work. It provisions add-ons, overwrites a few files. I just say yes, and then it goes ahead and deploys them. And the reason I want to show you this is because, try it again. Or maybe we just need to delete it first. Try again. Looks good this time. If we go to our app, localhost 9000, which isn't running. If we did a test on it with Lighthouse, Chrome or Google. It's a tool for web developers that allows you to basically see the performance of your app and whether it's PWA enabled or if you have all the requirements for a progressive web app. There's basically 3 requirements. There's one, it's HTTPS. So if you run it locally, you might get like a 70 or an 80 score, but you're never going to get 100% unless you actually went and created a local host certificate that is valid. And making those valid is really hard, so I wouldn't even bother. Number 2 is that it has a service worker registered. So a service worker is what does the background caching of API requests or any request from your app. And then the last thing is it has a web app manifest. And that web app manifest allows you to actually install the app. So if you're on a phone, especially an Android device, and you come to a progressive web app, there will be a little bar at the top that says, do you want to install this? Just like they do with mobile apps, except instead of a 65 meg download, it'll just be putting the app that's already been loaded right onto your phone. And then if people have coded it nicely, it will actually work offline and function like a real app. You can do push notifications and all that kind of stuff. So Heroku tried, but you know what? Maybe it's already there since I deployed it before. That's a good opportunity. Gallery, PWA. Maybe you can do it. Or we could do Heroku logs, tail. Starting. Question is it the new one I deployed or the one I deployed like an hour ago? We'll find out. The code's very similar, and the good news is, so I wasn't able to get VLC set up on this machine to actually record this talk, but I am writing a blog post about this app that I'm developing here, and I'll be publishing that next week, and I hope to do a screencast as well, so you'll be able to watch all that online, and there'll be much more detail on how to do PWAs, what OpenID Connect is, and how all that works. Okay, so now there we go. And so this has been configured already to actually log in with Okta instead of Keycloak because I didn't really want to put Keycloak in the cloud, and I don't think if I did I could deploy it on Heroku. It's just not that easy. It's like embedded JBoss or whatever. But if you look at our security settings, it shows you that if you have those Okta settings as an environment variable, you can very easily use a Heroku command called config set to set those as properties on your app, and then it'll be using it in production. So let's see if we have entities here. No, there's no entities, so I didn't create that, but there's a couple cool libraries I found to do this gallery, and I'll talk more about that in the blog post. But basically, it allows you, one is EXIF data that you can extract from pictures. There's a really nice library out there. Let's do Java EXIF metadata. So this metadata extractor library will allow you to get like width and height and when the photo was taken and all that kind of data. Just like if you upload it to Flickr, it has a bunch of data about the camera and all that. So that's a pretty nice library to do that. And then for React, there's this React photo gallery library that does kind of a Flickr type of layout where it lays it out and puts all your images laid out. And so I was able to integrate both of those, and they work really nicely. So just to show you one more thing on Okta, and that is that if you do have an account, and Keycloak allows the same thing, is you can customize the look and feel of everything. So for us, it's this sign-in page here, and you can basically go in and you could change, the widget itself to just say like JHipster rocks, and you would see a different like name at the top of the little sign-in screen. You could also change the username and password labels. You can change all these help titles. You can add some custom links. But if you have a custom domain like id.jhipster.org, which I started setting up but never finished, you can actually customize all the HTML for your sign-in page. So that's something that people say, the sign-in page doesn't look like my app. Well, you can just have your app, let's say, as pwagallery.jhipster.org. You could have id.jhipster.org is where your login page is, right? And it's very well branded. And then if you can have custom error pages as well, and you can also have custom emails, so they come from your domain instead of someone else. So Keycloak supports all as well. So it's very nice to be able to configure that and give people a nice new looking UI. So additional resources on OAuth. OAuth.net is the specification. If you want to go read it and get some good bedtime tiredness in, you can read the specification. And it's both for OAuth clients, which talk to an OAuth server like Okta or Keycloak, as well as if you want to implement your own OAuth server, which we have with our UAA server in JHipster. That is actually its own OAuth server. OAuth 2.0 servers is OAuth.com, which is actually owned by Aaron Parecki, who I'm proud to say is now a coworker of ours. We hired him. He's a developer advocate like I am. And he has a book called OAuth 2.0 Servers that actually has it's online as well as in a printed book. And so I did bring some. Because I knew there'd be questions, right? Everyone's got questions. You guys have to have questions. We're not in Norway, right? In Norway, like you ask people if they have questions, and it's so silent. And so what I learned is you wait like 2 or 3 minutes, and then people get really uncomfortable, and they'll be like, okay, I have a question. So these are $40 books. I brought those. I also have some JHipster stickers, which anyone can get, but these are rewards for good questions. Developer.okta.com/blog is where I blog about JHipster a lot. I think I have 4 or 5 blog posts out there, as well as the one that I'll post next week. Oh, and I want to show you real quick before we give out the books is developer.okta.com blog. This is the one I wrote earlier. Deploy your Spring Boot app and Angular PWA as a single artifact. So this is based on the same things that JHipster does, which is using the Maven front-end plugin. And so if you scroll down or you look for logout, come on, logout with Okta. This is how you do it. People have been asking about this for a while. So if you want to destroy SSO for your app, even though we provided it for you, you can do global logout. So here's how it works. You basically from the OAuth 2 REST template in Spring, you can get an ID token. And once you get that ID token, you can send it to a logout URL, and you basically return that back to the client, and then the client can send a logout URL and ID token as a hint to Okta, and that'll log you out. I tried to do it server side, where you could actually just post it, from the Java code. For some reason, we don't support that. Like, it should be the same, right? Like maybe I need a different origin header or something like that. But I couldn't get it to work on the server. I got to work on the client. And if you want to do the same thing, that's how you do it. So, questions? Here we go. Antonio wants a book.
Yeah, you work for Okta.
Yep.
And you talk and do a lot of code for Keycloak. Which one is best, Keycloak or Okta?
Keycloak is best on a plane, right? Because it runs in a Docker container and we're all cloud. Like if you want to use us on premises, sorry, we don't do that.
Oh, you don't do that? Okay.
We don't do that.
Okay.
Did you want a book? Are you going to read it? Yeah? Okay. One more.
Hi. Yeah. What is the criteria to choose between authorization code flow or implicit code flow?
What was the question?
What is the criteria to choose between authorization code flow or implicit?
So the question was, what is the criteria between choosing between implicit and authorization code flow? Implicit is when you have a SPA, a single page application, and no backend. Like you just wrote this SPA that talks to like other APIs that maybe require, OAuth, and you have no control of the backend. So there's two channels in OAuth. There's a front channel and there's a back channel. Front channel happens over the browser. You can see the redirects, you can see the URLs and stuff like that. Back channel is what Spring Security can do because it has that access token. It can talk directly to Okta or Keycloak and do the token exchange from that code to the access token. So it's much more secure because the client secret is actually sent by the back channel and no one can see that, right? Versus the front channel, like if you have a client secret in your front SPA, you're doing it wrong. And that's actually why I rewrote our OAuth support in JHipster, because we were doing that. We had a client secret.
I did it. I remember.
We had a client secret in there. So, book for you.
Is there another question? Because we've got 3 minutes.
I'll take more, but no books for you.
You keep here, and I will do the question with you.
So you said that actually Okta it's not on premise, so it's only cloud. Now Germany, actually also European Union, regarding data privacy, how you can handle it.
So GDPR. We have data centers in the EU and we are GDPR compliant. And if you like delete data, it actually deletes it, all the way back in our backups and everything. So we've been preparing for that for months, and we're fully compliant. So shouldn't be any problems there.
Perhaps you can take some questions for Julien, or for Deepu, or for Joe also, because we are right on time.
Yes, we.
So if you have other question on this morning session.
All right, I got one more slide. I wrote a book. Download it. It's free from InfoQ, but the reason I've been promoting it a whole lot is because it uses JHipster 4, and to have a book that says, hey, use JHipster 4, it's kind of like, meh, JHipster 5's out. I mean, it's only been out a day, but I do plan to update it for JHipster 5, but I do want to let you know that it used to be 120, 125 pages. Now it's 162 because there is a chapter in there on microservices with OAuth, and it shows you how to configure all that with JHipster and make all that work. So that's sexy. Right. Hopefully it doesn't get bigger. Like if I was gonna add a chapter on Ionic, but it's like then I got to maintain that, so I don't really want to do that. But I think most mini books are never updated, right? And I'm on version 5, so.
So here we have a question.
Right.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
Yes, thank you.
Here's a question.
It's for Matt Raible, and it's not a question indeed, but I want to thank you a lot because I work as a professor and your resources are very, very useful, and I want to thank you publicly.
Cool. You're welcome.
And thanks to all the JHipster core team and community.
Yeah.
Are you Alfredo? Yeah. It's you. Glad to see you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. We like you too.
Other questions? We can take questions in French and we try to translate if you want to. No, everybody is angry. We have one here. French or English?
Hi, it's a question for you actually concerning the blueprints. My question might be really stupid, but I'm really comfortable about changing the generator on JHipster directly. Mm-hmm. Actually, I do that.
Okay.
And I maintain it myself.
Yeah, like a fork, right?
Yeah, like a fork. And I think it's easier because I'm lazy, as many developers, I think. And I think it's easier actually to change the generator, the code on the generator and maintain it than having a blueprint of it. I mean, I think the blueprint will be more useful for big company without anyone to update it. But
again, depends on what you're doing, right? Say, for example, if you have a fork of JHipster, and if you're changing, say, few if-else conditions somewhere, then probably it's fine if you maintain your own thing. But if you're having a fork of JHipster to, say, replace some of the client-side files or server-side files with your own templates, then probably it's much easier for you to do this, because as you saw in the generator code itself, you are just calling super dot this, super dot that. Like for the phases, you're only overwriting some stuff. So you only have to care about that part. You don't have to, say, for example, like JHipster 5 is out right now. If you have your own fork, you really have to update everything that changed in JHipster. It's a huge task. I wouldn't do it. If I had a fork, I wouldn't spend time. If it's small changes, I wouldn't spend time like rewriting everything, because some of it you can do pull requests and merge, but still you have to fix a lot of stuff yourself. You have to deal with all the issues arising from your changes. But if you're doing a blueprint, you're really concentrated only on that particular part. Because yesterday when, the JHipster Kotlin blueprint was originally written for JHipster 4. So I was working on it day before yesterday. It was with JHipster 5, it was not working at all. But I really didn't have to go through changing everything. It was only few template files that I had to fix. So it was as easy as that. So I would still say it is much easier than maintaining, because I have maintained my own forks of JHipster in the past. So from that experience, I would say it's much easier to have a blueprint than a fork if you're trying to replace, say, templates, or like trying to replace behavior of a certain part of generator. Of course, if you're doing very minimal changes, then probably it doesn't really matter. But for bigger changes, then it's definitely worthwhile.
We take another one. We take two. So yours and one after, and then we go lunch.
Good. Quite good. A little sweet for my taste, but was good. So this question goes to Matt regarding single sign-on. If I do some apps which are actually working in intranet, I mostly need also authentication with an LDAP or Active Directory. I need to be honest, I haven't made any research regarding this, how JHipster fits with that. Are there some documentation, or can you give some hints regarding this?
Right, so what Okta supports is basically what we call Active Directory syncing. So you'll install an agent on one of your Active Directory servers that'll sync with Okta, and so it'll put all your users into the cloud. It can use the LDAP protocol if you want, or you can use LDAP as well. And then basically you have a copy of your users in the cloud, and you can still make it so your Active Directory is the master. So any changes that you make in Active Directory, you get automatically synced. That's the way to do that we recommend.
So it will be sort of push from your side, or it will be a push from our side?
Push from your side. Okay. Yep. And I'm sure Keycloak probably has something similar if you want to use Keycloak.
We had one last question. Sorry.
Thank you. Didier from Grenoble. Most of the time when you have to deal with an application, you need some preferences for the user, special preferences, such as, I don't know, for my case, is my IoT gateway must be public or not, and so on. How can I manage that with Keycloak or Okta?
So in Okta, we have custom profile attributes you can use. I'm sure Keycloak has the same thing, and you can basically, customize or add custom ones, and then you can go into like the ID token, and you can configure it so that's added as a claim, and it comes in the JOT, and then you'll basically be able to read it from the OAuth to authentication details, and you could save it as a record in your database, or you could just read it when you need it. So you can certainly do that as well.